there were a number of factors that seemed to influence success or failure. What really surprised me was that those factors were true not just in my anecdotal, analysis, but they were true in a, more traditional survey research model proved out there. And then ironically, if you took a look at some historical business analysis that had been done on companies in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, and you looked at those threads, the same things were even true then, right? So in a period of 60 years, right, what's causing success and failure has not changed dramatically.
Welcome to Grow Think Tank. This is the one and only place where you will get insight from the founders and the CEOs of the fastest growing privately held companies. I am the host. My name is Gene Hammett. I help leaders and their teams navigate the defining moments of their growth. Are you ready to grow?
Today, we're going to have a great conversation with the author of The Structure of Success, Patrick Esposito, and I talk about the structures that are included inside of our businesses that we don't really think about. The way he organized it, I think, is really kind of special. Patrick explains some of the things that you want to pay attention to so that you can avoid the mishaps of failure, but also what to focus on as your company matures. And one of them was really interesting. And I realized there was kind of a gap in my own planning and strategy for growth of my business, but you have to tune in to figure out exactly what that is. My name is Gene Hammett. I'm an executive coach. We do leadership development for fast growth companies where we help managers become leaders. We also do cultural transformations inside of companies that really are on the brink of growth and they want that predictable success. They want, a succession planning. They want leadership development for all levels of people. And if you're curious about some of the things that we do for clients, reach out to us and we're happy to help. If you're kind of want to be hesitant and hang around and just kind of connect and see what we're up to, you can certainly keep listening to episodes, or you can actually take an active role with something we call virtual conversations. We invite guests that have been on the show before. We invite some special guests. We invite prospects. We invite clients and people that are really experts in their world of being CEOs of fast growth companies. And we put topics up every month and we discuss it. The next one coming up is going to help you grow your business. All you have to do is go to coreelevation.com/virtual conversations. See what the topic is. You can register for it. If you can't make it, I would suggest registering anyway. We'll give you a great summary and something that you can really use. And we will also, look forward to helping you grow your business. And you can just tune in that way. Just go to coreelevation.com/virtual conversations and check out the next episode. Now, here's the interview with Patrick. Patrick, how are you?
Good, Gene. Thanks for having me today.
Well, excited to have you on the podcast, and we're going to have a great conversation about your book, The Structure of Success. Before we dive into the book and the core topic, tell us a little bit about your background.
So, my background, attorney by training, but probably more of an engineer or designer by mentality. So, worked briefly as an attorney, worked briefly in a government role, and then realized that my entrepreneurial traits needed to be realized. And so started a company actually initially with my father, my then girlfriend, who now is my wife of nearly 20 years. And we were focusing on some consulting with the vision of eventually developing some software. Did that. Raised some venture money, led it to a successful exit, had some other great experiences starting companies, serving in executive roles at mid-sized publicly traded companies. And all of that kind of brought me around to analyzing what makes small and medium-sized businesses work and what makes them not work. And that's ultimately what led to the book.
Fantastic. The Structure of Success is a book that really helps people understand some of the patterns that are going on. I know we had a chance to talk about this. How would you give us a 2-sentence summary of what you hope this book is used for?
So when I set about writing it, there were two things, right? One was trying to prove out whether some of my theories that I had experienced working with 100 or so businesses were true by doing a survey of 100 other businesses to see if what I saw creating success or causing failure was true. And so the 2-sentence, what do I hope someone takes away? I hope they figure out how to avoid failure and how to put themselves on a path to success.
I'm sensing, Patrick, that we have a lot in common. I
Indeed.
have a natural tendency to listen to my gut, but also validate through conversations with others. When I was writing my next book, How to Have Tough Conversations, I went
Right.
out there and talked to 100 CEOs about tough conversations.
Right.
And so you're collecting data around this. What was the most interesting piece of the data that came back that might be a little bit surprising to you and all of us?
Yeah, so as far as the data goes, and I think, by the way, love what you're doing with having tough conversations. If I had in another world, my book might have been called "Doing Tough Thinking," right? Because at the end of the day, a lot of what makes businesses succeed or makes them fail is not, to your point, right, of where you're going, not having tough conversations, not doing the hard work of sourcing data to figure out what decisions you ought to make, and then not thinking through those inputs in a way that helps you reposition your business, whether it's your team, whether it's your direction, whether it's how you're structured, right? And so the I guess the thing that I knew going in, right, to this was there were a number of factors that seemed to influence success or failure. What really surprised me was that those factors were true not just in my anecdotal, analysis, but they were true in a, more traditional survey research model proved out there. And then ironically, if you took a look at some historical business analysis that had been done on companies in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, and you looked at those threads, the same things were even true then, right? So in a period of 60 years, right, what's causing success and failure has not changed dramatically. So that was sort of the surprising fact.
Let's look at avoiding the things that get in the way of success,
Right.
because that was one of the elements that you mentioned in the summary.
Right.
What do you wish CEOs knew more about to avoid those?
So, when I looked at how do you create success and how do you avoid failure, right? Part of it is having a system to examine the major elements that cause success and failure. And everybody says, well, it's if you're a software company, it's a large player coming into your market. Well, I mean, that's certainly true, but there's ways to avoid that happening, right? There's ways that you can make sure that if they're coming into a market, they come into the market through you, and that's by having a great business. The 8 factors, right? It's having a great governance team, having a great management team, operating both of them effectively, having a strategy for adjustments and pivots, having a strategy for making investments to support growth, and then also having these structures to look at how you manage disputes, right, with your partners, how you explore mergers, acquisitions, business partnerships. But the last two, how do you do succession planning and how do you plan and recover from disasters? The remarkable part about having the tough conversations, like you like to focus folks on having, right, is that the last two, succession planning and getting ready for disasters that can happen, those are the things nobody, not only do they not want to talk about it, they usually don't want to think about it, right? And at the end of the day, those are two things that everybody tends to ignore, often to their peril. And I don't mean that just from the standpoint of you as an executive leader might have a health issue, right? It could be that your team decides they're going, a large chunk of them decide they're going to leave, or someone has an untimely health issue that comes up. There's a lot of things you can do to make sure that your business is really resilient. And it's a lot of the thoughts and a lot of the conversations that we don't have that ultimately can negatively impact the business.
Now, Patrick and I have been talking about failure. And one of the things I think you can do, it's just a simple exercise as the CEO of a company, is look at the reasons why your company could fail and really, stretch yourself. No one planned for COVID and no one had a plan. I'm not saying we're going to go that deep into it, but you should have something that you understand how your company would fail if a big competitor came in, or if things changed, or AI began to gobble up some of the work that you're doing and made what you're doing irrelevant. And I have to think about that too as an executive coach. How will AI impact us? And so that's one of the things on my list. But what's on your list? Do you have that list? I encourage you to take the time. I call this a coffee exercise. It probably takes about as much time as to drink a cup of coffee or maybe 2 cups, so that you can put it down and let it simmer. And then maybe even create some strategies to avoid, so that your company can really be stronger because of it. Back to Patrick. As you were describing this, I know we were all surprised by COVID. No one had this on their plans, but I would bet that it's still a few amount of people that have stepped back and go, oh, since that impacted our business in such a drastic way, what are the other things that could impact us? And I'll
Mhm.
be honest, I haven't done that with mine. I haven't slowed down to even think about those impacts. And that's what you're saying, is having a system for, looking at these things, at least having an awareness that these things could happen.
Yep.
So Patrick, thanks for bringing that up to me. I want to step back to the book.
Yep.
The Structure of Success. Any book I know is hard to write. People liking it to giving birth, and us being two males, we've never gone through the pain of this, but there is a certain amount of stress and anxiety and uncertainty that you have to go through in order to publish a book. Hopefully everyone can understand that and empathize a little bit with us. But why did you have to write The Structure of Success?
Yeah, and to your point, I often look at investments of time, right? It's one of the few things that we, one, can control, and two, one of the things that we often tend to give away way too often, right? And so writing a book, definitely a giant investment of time. The reason I decided to write this book is because I hadn't seen anyone write it yet, right? And when I look at, the sleepless nights that I've had running, new companies or helping to guide, as a member of the executive team, publicly traded companies, there's things that keep you up at night, right? And one of the feelings that I had as I was up at night, right, was you're thinking about the problems and you're thinking about the solutions. And I just kept thinking to myself, there's got to be a better way than just sort of this, insomnia driven worry, right? And how do you make worrying productive, right? And because you can, right? And if you just think about everything as a system, right? Maybe you don't have as many sleepless nights. And so I started looking at both how do you take a framework, right, to make worrying and planning productive rather than causing sleep deprivation. And then how do you look at this so that you're focusing on the right things? And so, to your question, the reason why I wrote the book is because no one else had done it. If someone else had done it, there wouldn't have been a need.
I guess we could all say that when we write books, because we wouldn't write a book that's just like it.
Right.
And I know within my book, there's lots in the genre.
Right.
And I wanted to write a book that was different enough, because of what I'm hearing from my conversations with people. And when you look at, the work that you put in there, and I love this question for authors, because the best book you will ever read is the one you write,
Right. Right.
because it requires you to sharpen your language and to get really clear about what you really mean by these ideas. Because before that, they're floating around and maybe you talk about them, you can whiteboard them. But when you actually have to put it in words and maybe a graphic or two, and you have to make sense for others,
Yep.
what was the one thing in the book that you feel like really stands out head and shoulders above everyone else as impactful if you understood that concept?
So, I think one of the concepts in the book that I think a lot of folks don't really think about too often, right? Because they're worried about selling, they're worried about delivering, they're worried about recruiting, is the fact that when you start a business, you're normally making very modest investments, right? In terms of if it's an LLC, in terms of the operating agreement, if it's a corporation, in terms of the bylaws or the shareholder agreement, you're kind of making the smallest investment you can make to get the thing off the ground. And a lot of times, folks don't really turn back and try to create a more robust structure, right, from a legal perspective for the business that frames up how are you going to, if the owners don't agree, how are you going to continue, or how are you going to move apart, but do so in a way that doesn't undermine the livelihoods of your entire team, right? So part of what I think was really great about writing the book was allowing me to begin counseling others that there is an appropriate time, and that appropriate time is actually probably about 1 year into the business, right? Because we know the failure rates of small businesses, they're high, right? 1 year, 2 year, 3 years, 5 years, but they're really high 1 year. And if you can just create enough of a small amount of money that you can deploy to resetting the framework of the business, if you make it through that first year, to properly develop the structures that will allow the business to work its way through disputes or difficulties, you will ultimately probably serve yourself incredibly well, because then you've kind of created that model for how do we have tough conversations? And how do we make tough decisions?
Now, Patrick was talking about a reset as your business matures. I'm going to give you 3 areas that I would love for you to have a reset on. One is culture. When you think about the way people engage with each other, how you communicate. Yes, I'm writing a book called How to Have Tough Conversations, but part of that book is peer-to-peer accountability, which is a culture that protects itself and are willing to engage in critical feedback with people that are out of alignment, so that it doesn't rest on the shoulders of just the CEO or just the top leadership. You want everyone to police the culture. Another area is values. If your values are stale, if they're not really being lived by, there's something you did a long time ago, you want to make sure you update those so they really do represent who you are as an organization, how you are growing and impacting the world. And finally, leadership development. A lot of people, it's an afterthought, even though they say it's important to invest in employees. But my guess is if you have managers right now that they're not getting the investment, they're not getting the training, they're not getting the real coaching that's necessary for growth. And what I've found is you don't know how dangerous it is that those people are walking around in doubt, not sure of what to do. Maybe they're doing things and moving forward, but they're not doing the right things. They don't know how to prioritize things. Leadership development is not an afterthought. It really is something that you want to have a plan for. So those are 3 areas that I would love for you to think a little bit more about as your company has matured and the things have changed: the culture, the values, and your leadership development plan for your organization. Back to Patrick. Yeah, I get what you're saying. You do all this stuff pre-planning, and then you go start to execute, and you get focused on customers and revenue and profitability and all the things that you had dreamed of, but
Yep.
you never go back to really recalibrate those operating agreements and the conversations that are necessary, that to me are really foundational, like culture, right? How we're going to make decisions if we're going to make a big investment. How, what's our exit plan?
Right.
It's hard to
Right.
even think about that when you're just starting the business.
Well, that's exactly right. That's exactly right.
Patrick, The Structure of Success is a great book for people who are looking to probably shore up some of these areas that you've been talking about. What is a story from the feedback you get from your audience and the people that are using the book, that why they like the book so much?
So, what I have found in terms of some of the feedback on the book is that 2 things happen, right? One is someone reads it and says, I wish I had had this book when, right? And when is a time where they had some difficulty with their business, whether it was a sense that sales were falling off, whether it was, health issues, or the death of their co-founder, right? They wish they had had that book to help guide them through that journey and figure out how to, 1, have maybe been better prepared, or 2, how to respond to that. That is one piece of feedback I've received. The second piece of feedback I've received is, that it's given them a new way to look at creating better efficiency on some of their strategic planning. Right. So just to give you sort of a thought there, a lot of folks talk a lot about, we're going to do some strategic planning. We're going to figure out our priorities. What's the right way to do that? Well, a lot of the time it's focusing on the things that are most important. Right. And if you know what ultimately helps a business to succeed or can make a business fail, those are the right ways to determine what those priorities ought to be. Because a lot of folks, will come out with these planning sessions with, hey, here's our goals for the year. And it's 1, maybe way too many things, or 2, it may be things that aren't as critically important to the success of your business because it doesn't focus on the real structural components. So those are probably the 2 ways that I've seen the feedback, is either I wish or thank you because you've helped me.
Well, Patrick, we've had a great conversation around this. I don't know if there's anything that we felt like we've left out of talking about the book. Is there anything you wanted to highlight before we wrap up today?
No, just that, 1, I'm grateful to have had the opportunity to be on and talk with you, and excited about reading your new book.
Well, Patrick, thanks for being here and sharing your wisdom.
Hey, thanks so much, Gene.
Wow, another fantastic episode. I love what I'm doing. Talking to authors is very refreshing. I love the organization that they bring to the interviews. I love the fact that they're really helping the audience with specific things, telling the stories that really help you move the needle. And that is what we did today with Patrick. So The Structure of Success is a great book. Check it out where you buy books. When you think of growth and you think of leadership, think of Growth Think Tank. As always, live with courage. We'll see you next time.